Welcome back to another exciting video about R programming. Right, today we're going to be talking about manipulating your data frame or your data set or your data. Right, this is part of, or wrangling your data. People sometimes make reference to data wrangling. It's a lot of fun. Okay, this is part of a series that we're doing. Right, so this is video number 3. We're looking at explore, clean, manipulate, describe, and summarize, visualize and analyze your data. That's the pipeline. These are the things that you need to do when you get a data set. You need to make some sense out of it, right? Within manipulate your data, this is what we're going to cover, right? And you may know some of this, you may know that some of it might be new to you, but we're going to go quite quickly, and so you might need to kind of stop, rewind, look at some of the video again. But a lot of this is stuff that if you've been following my videos, you'll already be familiar with. Okay, renaming a variable, easy peasy. Reordering variables, super duper easy as well. Changing a variable type, we've talked about that before, we'll go through it quite quickly. Selecting variables to work with, super duper easy, we'll go through that very fast. Filtering and arranging data, obviously very easy. Recoding data might be something that's new to some of you, we'll look at that. Changing your data using Mutate, also not difficult at all. Now, here's something that you may not have waded into. Using the if-else function to make conditional changes. So if it's this, change it to that, or else change it to something else. Okay, also kind of quite interesting. And this is new, right? We haven't dealt with this on the channel yet. Reshaping your data frame, going from wide to long or long to wide. And I'm going to show you a really, really nice example of that. Now, keep in mind that all of the examples that I'm going to show you, everything I'm going to do, you will be able to do at home. You can follow along and repeat everything I'm doing. Why? Because I'm going to use data that you have access to, right, on your computer. Built into R, there are data frames that you can use to practice. And those are the data frames that I use to do the demonstrations, right? You'll be able to do everything I'm doing at home. You don't need to download any new data. You don't need to go find it on the internet somewhere. You don't need to create it. It's all right there for you. Okay, boom shakalaka, let's get going.
If you want to learn about R programming, then you have come to the right place. On this YouTube channel, we're creating R programming videos on everything.
Before we carry on, of course, it's the case that you need to have installed the Tidyverse library. And I'm not going to get into that in this video. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go and watch my video on packages. The Tidyverse includes a range of packages that automatically get installed onto your computer. You only need to install it once. After that, you just type the word library, Tidyverse, and all of those packages, and the expanded vocabulary that comes with them for R are always on your computer, there for you to use. Also, some of the data sets that we use in these tutorials come with the Tidyverse. So they're all there ready on your computer. And just so that you know, if you type in the word data, brackets, you are going to get a list of all of the data sets that are on your computer that you can use to practice all of your data wrangling and data manipulation. A lot of fun. Okay, let's get going. Giddy up. Okay, we're going to use the mSleep data set, right? It's in there. You can have a look at it. And if we push question mark, mSleep, down here in the bottom right, it's going to give you a little summary of what that data set's about, and it's going to tell you about each of the variables in that data set. So that's kind of a useful little thing. If we say glimpse is one of the Tidyverse functions. It's going to give us a summary of that data set, each of the variable names and the variable type, with a couple of examples of the observations that are there within. Right, we can see all of that here, and of course if we go view, we can look at the data set in that way. Okay, easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Let's keep going. Our first lesson in this particular tutorial is how to rename a variable. So something's called something, you want to call it something else. Very easy. We use the rename function. Okay, because we're working in the Tidyverse. When I do this, I always start with the data set, then I put in the pipe operator, right? And just so that you know, if you push Shift Control M, it creates the pipe operator. So it's nice and quick. Shift Control M, pipe operator, which means that we're going to take this data set and pipe it in to the next line of code. And the rename function, now pay attention here. What you're going to do with the rename function is look at the data that we've got here. We've got a variable called conservation, right? When we say rename, the first argument before the equal sign is what you're going to rename it to, right? The new name for your variable. So we're going to call the new name conserve, and that's going to be equal to the existing name, which is conservation. You got it? Okay, easy peasy, lemon squeezy. Let's push that, and of course here you can see it says conserve. If we did glimpse, it would do the same thing. Just so that you know, let's do that. Pipe operator and glimpse, just so that we have it in the format that we were before. Right, there you go, conserve instead of conservation. Okay, giddy up, let's go, let's ride. Okay, the next lesson, reordering your variables. Okay, stop watching the video. Stop watching the video. I want to give a quick, big thank you to Nested Knowledge for supporting the creation of this video. If you've ever gone through the struggle of doing a literature review or a systematic literature review, believe me, I know your pain. I've been there, and what I'm about to tell you is going to absolutely blow your mind. Nested Knowledge have a platform that supports the entire process, from designing your research question and search parameters to screening, tagging, and extracting the appropriate papers. The platform automatically generates visuals that you can use for qualitative analysis. So check out these interactive sunburst diagrams used to get an overview of trial endpoints. Or, and this is going to blow your mind, it can extract study results to do meta-analysis. So check out these ready for publication forest plots. And this next amazing feature is going to become, I believe, the new standard for systematic review. It's being able to publish a living document that auto-updates as more data becomes available. Okay, now things are going to get really crazy. If you're working or studying in an academic institution, then this platform is absolutely free for you. So check them out by clicking on the link in the description below. Okay, let's get on with the video. Now, we've often talked about the select function. The select function selects the variables you want to work with, but just so that you know, when you use the select function, whatever order you put the variables into the select function will be the order that they pop up in that data set, right? So if I say select var name and then everything else, everything bracket bracket, it's going to do just that. And here we say, here it's now ordered into var is your first variable name, and then it's just put everything else in the order that was in before. Okay, that's not complicated at all. I just wanted you to see that. Okay, the next thing we're going to talk about is changing a variable type, and we've dealt with this before. I'm just going to go through it very briefly. The function class, if you put into that function any object, and in this case it's a variable, the variable var, which is part of the data frame msleep, and we push Control Enter, we're going to see that the type of variable is character, right? And the same thing applies if we did glimpse. Let's just do that because it's probably a little bit easier. Glimpse msleep, all right, and then we see here that next to the var variable, it's called a character. That's the kind of data that it is. We want to change that using base R. We can take the var as the variable part of the msleep dataset. We use a little $sign there, and apply to it the function as factor. So as factor, open close brackets, and the argument inside the brackets are applied to function is applied what is applied to that function, and all of that gets assigned to var msleep. In other words, we're going to overwrite var. We're not going to create a new variable, but we're going to overwrite that with this new information. Okay, and if we do that and run glimpse, once again we can see next to var it is now been designated a factor. In this video, I'm not going to get into the difference between characters and factors and all the different types of variables. I've got other videos on that. This is just a how-to. I'm assuming at this point you know what a factor is. If you don't, go and watch. I've got videos all about that, right? Let's keep going. Okay, another way to do the same thing, right? Using the tidyverse system, using the pipe operators, we can start with msleep, right? There we go, msleep, pipe operator, and then, right, mutate. And we're going to talk a little bit about mutate in this video. We're going to see this come up again, but of course, when you use mutate, the first argument is what it is that you're going to either create as a new variable or what you're going to overwrite as an existing variable. So we put that as the first argument. And what is going to be assigned to that? Well, in this case, we're taking var, right, what's in the var variable, all of those observations, and we're applying them to the function as character, because now basically I'm showing how we can change it back from a factor back into a character, just to demonstrate the process. And then we're going to say glimpse again, and just keep an eye open. We're going to see what is currently a factor. When I push this, it's going to change to, and what is currently a factor is going to change to a character, and voila, now the var variable we can see has been designated a character again. Okay, so we've changed it from a character to a factor, now back to a character. Okay, super duper easy. Let's keep going. Okay, select a variable to work with. Now, of course, we've dealt with this in multiple videos, and even in this particular tutorial, we've used select to order our variables, but I just wanted to show you a couple of little tips and tricks that might help you in your selection process. Right, So if we say names, apply the function names to the object mSleep, down here we're going to see the list of names in that particular data set, right? We want to select a few of them, and there's a couple of little tips and tricks I want to show you right now. Okay, so firstly, you can tell R which variable numbers to use. So we're saying 2 to 4. We could just say 2, but if we said 2 to 4, that's what the little colon says. It's gonna look for the second, third, and fourth variable. Okay, so those are the first ones it's going to select. Then, of course, you can just type the name of a variable, awake. So that's the next one that's going to be selected. And then you can use these little things. Start with, for example, you can also say ends with. So start any variable that starts with the word sleep, or okay, and the next one is going to be any variable that contains the character WT, which in this particular data set stands for wait. Okay, and then we again going to apply the function names, and let's see what happens if we do that. And as we expected, it's taken the second, third, and fourth variable, then awake, because we typed that, and then sleep, 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 and awake, wait, wait. Right, so it's done exactly what we asked. Of course it has. Okay, right. Have you got that? Of course you do. Let's keep going. Okay, to filter and arrange, we've talked about filtering and arranging multiple times. I want to talk you through some of the subtleties and nuances there within, however. Right, so there might be a couple of tips and tricks that you pick up now that you weren't aware of before. Right? If you type in unique as a function and then a data frame and a variable, it's going to tell you for that variable what all of the possible observations might include. Right? So down here we've got carnivora, primates, rodentia, etc., etc. These are all the different kinds of mammals. Now, we want to subset our data and only extract certain observations, certain rows, right? So previously we were talking about columns, those are the variables, selecting those. Now we want to select very particular rows of data that meet certain criteria. Well, we use filter, right? So we're going to filter. Now, I want you to see something here. I've got two brackets here, open brackets, and then I've got open brackets again. And I've said the variable order must be equal to, double equals, when you're using a filter. In other words, you're not saying this text is equal to that. You're not assigning this to that, but you're asking a question. This is, where it is the case that within the order variable, the observation is equal to carnivora, then you want it to select that observation and include that observation in your subset, right? This vertical line means or, and then we've said in the same variable order, include observations where it sees the word primate, right? Now I've put all of that, this entire section, into its own brackets because I want to apply a second criteria after that. In other words, first of all, include all of the observations where either of these criteria apply. And I know people kind of want to use the word and here, because they want to say we want the carnivora and we want the primates. Why not say and? And look, we say or because it's when you look at a particular, when you're saying to R, when you look at an observation, include that observation if within the variable order it meets the criteria of carnivora or it meets the criteria of primates, not both, right? You can't ask it to identify both. If you said and there, it would find nothing. But in another variable, so and in sleep total, we want to also include only those observations where sleep total is more than 8, right? And then I've said, and then select name, order, and sleep total, just so that we're looking at a smaller data set when we do this. And I've asked it to arrange it. Now, this is the arrange function. Okay, arrange, and if I said sleep total, it would just arrange it from smallest to biggest with respect to sleep total. I've said minus sleep total, which means it's going to do it the exact opposite, the other way around. And if we say view, let's have a look at that. And we can see that, look, we've included names just so that we know with each observations. Then we've got order, and you can see that it's only included observations that include either carnivora or primates. And then each of the sleep total observations are above the number 8, okay, because we said and they have to be above 8. Now you can see we've ordered them from biggest to smallest. Okay, that's ordering. Super duper easy. Okay, let's keep going. Oh, before we keep going, there's another way that you can do this process here, right? So we've got order, we've got two options that we're ordering things by, filtering by over there. You can use this nice little operator in here, in. It's percentage in percentage, and that means you're saying filter, look at this variable here, order, and within that variable, if any of the criteria in this concatenation, so C open brackets and options, we call that a concatenation. If any of these words are identified, then include that particular observation. Okay, so this is kind of like saying or, and then we can say, and then sleep total more than 8, etc., etc. Notice when I'm doing it this way, I don't have to stick in an extra set of brackets. It deals with all of this together. And then, of course, we've done everything the same. The only other difference I've got in this code here is I've said arranged by order. Now notice, previously when I said arranged by sleep total, it was arranging it by a numeric variable. So sleep total is a number, and it arranged it from smallest to biggest. Order is not a numeric variable, right? It's a character variable, or it might be a factor, I'm not sure. I think it's a character variable here. And so when you arrange by a variable that's not numeric, it's going to do it in alphabetical order. So let's have a look at that. And of course, that's what it's done, right? So it's done all of the filtering that we want, but it's arranged it in alphabetical order. C comes before P. Okay, got it? Of course you got it. Let's keep going. Next, we're going to talk about the mutate function. We want to change the content of a particular variable. Again, not difficult at all. And we've looked at this a few times. That's why I'm going quite fast. We start with msleep and then mutate. Now, let's just get this right. When we use the mutate function, the first argument is the variable name that you're either going to overwrite or you're going to create. You may want to create a new variable, and I'll show you how to do that in just a second. But in this case, we're going to take the brain weight variable and overwrite it. And what are we going to overwrite it with? Well, that's the second argument, right? Brain weight times 1,000. So we're taking brain weight, which at the moment is in kilograms, and we're saying times 1,000 so that we'll look at the same data, but just in grams, right? So let's have a look at what that looks like. And over here you'll see, where's brain weight? And here now everything is in grams, right? So it's 115 grams instead of in kilograms. Okay, if instead of putting brain weight there, we put in a new something else, something that doesn't exist, brain weight in grams, right? Run that code. Same thing happens, except brain weight stayed the same, so it's still in kilograms, but it created a new variable called brain weight in grams, and it stuck those figures in there. Okay, super duper easy, boom shakalaka. Let's keep going. Right, this next one is really useful. This is a conditional change using the if-else function. Okay, if-else. And to understand how the if-else works, what I want to do is just quickly teach you about logical vectors that are based on a condition. So if we asked R just to list out brain weight as a variable in the msleep dataset, pushed enter here, it just churns out, it just gives us all the numbers, and NA is not available. This is missing data, but otherwise it gives us all the numbers. What if we asked a question of R, right? If we said msleep brain weight, so the brain weight variable in the msleep dataset, greater than 0.01, right? So that's just asking a question. Where is msleep greater than or equal, greater than 0.01? Okay, control enter. And now, instead of the numbers, it's just put, well, NA is still NA, right? Still missing. But for each number, it asks, for each of the observations, it asks that question and simply provides an answer, true or false, true, false, true, false, true, false, etc. And we call this a logical vector, right? It's just a logic. Is it true or is it false? And we can use that in our code to give our instructions. We can use that principle. So let's have a look at that, right? So to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new object. Okay, and you'll see why in just a second. It's just because I want to do something else with this in a minute. Size of brain. What are we assigning to size of brain? Well, everything else after this point in the code. Fair enough. Starting with msleep, pipe operator means, and then we want to select just name and brain weight. So we're just going to look at these two variables. That's just to simplify things. We're going to drop all the missing values, all the NA, drop the not available data from brain weight. That's just so that this is going to be easier to look at when we've done what we're doing. And then now here's where things get interesting. Mutate, we've talked about that. We're going to create a new variable called brain size, right? And what are we going to assign to brain size? In each of the observations, we're asking R to do this, right? We're saying if else, that's the function. And the arguments within if else go like this. It starts with the logical vector, right? So with respect to is brain weight more than 0.01, right? It asks that question. If the answer is true, then stick into that observation large, or else stick in small, right? So it's going to, at each data point, it's going to ask the question, and then if the answer is true, put large. If the answer is not true or false, it puts small, right? So if we make that object, and then I'm just going to quickly put size of brain, and we can, and it just so you can see what's happened here. And for each of the observations, so for each of the animals, it's looked at brain weight. It's asked, is this greater than 0.01? And if the answer to that is true, it's typed in the word large in this new variable that we've created called brain size. And the same applies for each of the observations, each row of data. Okay, you got it? It's super easy. Okay, now let's talk about recoding data or renaming a variable. Let's say, for example, we've now got large, small, large, small, large, small, but we wanted, for whatever reason, sometimes people in analysis would prefer to use a data dictionary that doesn't have words, but rather has numeric values that are represented of some sort of value. Right, so we want to change it instead of large and small to ones and twos, for example, for whatever reason, right? Now, let's have a look at the code. We're taking this data set that we've just created, this object, size of brain, and we're going to say mutate brain size. So we're going to replace the variable brain size with whatever comes after the equal sign, and now we're going to recode it. Recode means it looks at each observation and basically just shuffles things around in a way that we tell it to. And to recode it, in recode you got the first argument is what variable do you want to look at. So it's going to look at brain size. Okay, in this case we're overwriting brain size, but this could be different. In this case it's the same. Okay, and then where it sees large, it needs to change that to a 1, and where it sees small, it's going to change that to a 2. And if we run that code, voila, here in brain size we've got 1s and 2s instead of the words large and small. Okay, super duper easy. You got it? Of course you got it. Let's keep going. Now, here's where you've got to put your thinking hats on and really focus, pay attention. This is super interesting and it's really useful. You're going to find this really, really useful. And this is about reshaping our data from wide to long and long to wide. And what do we mean by that? Okay, I'm going to show you. First of all, the M-sleep data set isn't useful for this particular to illustrate this particular data manipulation. So if you haven't already, install the Gapminder package. And that comes with this lovely data set called Gapminder. And it's a lovely data set. Let's just quickly have a look at that. I've already installed it and we use the library to call it, but here it is. And it's got all of the countries, right? All the countries around the world and what continent they're in. For each year, it tells you things like life expectancy, population, GDP per capita, right? So super interesting data set, lovely to play with, and interesting. It's really interesting to look at. Okay, and just to simplify things, I'm going to make a data set, and that data set, now I just wanted to show you this because you might not have seen me do this before. We usually say start with Gapminder and then use the select function. You can just say select, and in the first argument, you put the data set that you want to look at, and then after that argument, it's all the variables that you want. The reason I'm doing this is just so that we're dealing with, and have a look at it, a slightly simplified data set, so you can see exactly what I'm trying to do here. So we just want to look at countries, year, and life expectancy. Now let's talk about what it is that we're trying to do here, what it is that, where we want to go with this. At the moment, you can see in this data set that for each country, there is a year, 1952, we've got a life expectancy. That's Afghanistan. But if we go down, we see that for Albania, we've also got a 1952 and we've got a life expectancy. And of course, you're going to find that for Algeria, we've got 1952 and we've got another life expectancy. So you can imagine that we could reshape this entire data set and look at it in a slightly different way, where you had, for each row, you could create column headings for each year. And for each country, you could just simply stick under those column headings what the life expectancy is for that year. So we would call that a wide data set. And what we're looking at the moment is we'll call that a long data set. It goes down long. Okay, I usually prefer to work with a long data set, by the way. But there are times when you might want a wide data set, right? So let's look at how we can do that change. And to do it, we use this pivot function, right? So we've created this data set called data. Now I'm going to create a new data set called wide data, right? Because remember I said that the data we were looking at there is long data. I'm going to create a new object called wide data. We start with data, and then we use this function right here, pivot wider, right? And what are the arguments that you need to put into pivot wider? Well, first of all, we're going to create a whole lot of new columns. What are those column headings going to be made up of? What does R need to look for? How is it going to know what names to give those column headings? Well, the names of those column headings, names from year. It's going to look at the year, what's currently the year variable, and it's going to take the observations that are in year and use those observations to make new variable column headings. Got it? Okay. Then underneath each of those headings, it needs to stick values. It needs to put some sort of value into each against each country. Well, where's it going to get those values from? It's going to get them from the life expectancy variable, right? So let's look at this again. We've used everything in year to make new columns, and underneath those columns we're going to take the values that are in life expectancy and populate what is going to be a new data set. Okay, should we run that? We've created our new object called data wide, or wide data, and if we look at it, voila, that's exactly what's happened. Can you see we've got new columns? Each of these columns is made up of a value that was in a variable called year. Can you see there's no variable called year anymore? The variable called year is gone. The values that were in that variable have been used to create new column headings or variables. Got it? Right. We don't have a variable called life expectancy anymore. Instead, we've taken the values that were in life expectancy and we've populated them into these observations for each country. And now we've got one row for each country. Afghanistan is just one row. It's not a whole series of rows. Albania is just one row. It's not a series of rows. And can you see that's quite nice? And that does become quite nice sometimes for data visualization. You might want to, create a graph out of this or something like that. So it is, I usually prefer things in long. Okay, well, let's say, how do we get this back? Okay, let's say the data came like this. This was the data set they gave us, but we want to work with long data, not wide data. How do we go back? Well, let's have a look at that. So to pivot wider, we set names from year and values from life expectancy. Okay, we're just going to go backwards, and we're going to say let's create a new data set called long data, and assigned to that is going to be, we're starting with wide data, and then we use the function pivot longer. And now there's three arguments you need to remember. The first argument is which columns do you want to work with, right? Because you may have a data set that's got a whole lot of stuff in there. And I've said here from the 2nd to the 13th, right? Let's look at our wide data set. We're not going to do anything differently with our country. The country variable isn't going to change. But from the 2nd to the 13th, we're going to select all of this data here, and we're going to work with that. Now, you can do this in multiple ways. I've just told it a range of numeric, the number of the variables that I want to use. You could use any other select function. You could say you want to use all of the variables that are numeric, for example, or you might want to use the actual names of the variables, for example. But this is kind of quite an easy way of doing it. Then, now, all of the names, those names were 1952, 1956, etc., etc. Those names are going to get moved into a new variable, which we're going to call year. And the values are going to all get moved and put into a new variable that we're going to call life expectancy. Okay, so let's think that through. All of these names up here are going to become the values in a new variable that we're going to call year. And all of the values that we've got over here are going to be all put into a new variable that we're going to call life expectancy. And it's going to land up looking like this, right? Year, life expectancy. But let's actually run that data. And if we get our long data and we have a look at it, it's basically what we started with. Okay. All right. Now listen, I hope you found that useful. Make comments if you'd like to. I'd love to see your comments in the description below if you're watching this on YouTube. Remember, I've got more teaching videos at learnmore365.com. Right. Learnmore365.com. I've got entire courses on R programming you can do there. Otherwise, don't ever change, don't do drugs, always do your best. Speak to you soon. See you again here for the rest of the series, right? So this was data manipulation. What's coming up next? Let's go back to the top and have a look. Don't go away, because the next video will be describe and summarize your data. Exciting stuff. Okay, take care. Have a great day. Bye.